So let's roll in here to the meat of the content today, working with buyers and talking about best practices to really go above and beyond customer service. I'm going to share with you a lot of best practices I have, and I hope we've got some experienced agents on the call today, and I hope some of you will share some of your best practices and chime in as we go through here. So let's get rolling. First thing that I want to kind of talk about, just to set the stage for this. You know, customer service, going above and beyond with customer service is not hard. I want to talk about kind of some no-brainer principles, base principles on customer service before we really dive into talking about how these apply to working with buyers. And some of these you're going to see come up on the screen and you're going to go, well, duh. But I think they're good reminders for us. Timely communication is the first one, especially right now. You've got to be in constant contact, even if you have no update or not a lot of information for them. Just reaching out, and right now is critical in doing that, as is, you know, during our normal course of business. Reaching out and being in touch with people, you've got to be timely with your communication. I know I'm at fault sometimes for I'm thinking about them, but I don't always reach out to tell them I'm thinking about them, and I think it's important to do that. This is one of my favorite lines, and I put this in here. And this is true when working with buyers. It's true in all situations, really, but we've got to listen to understand and not to respond. I know when we're face to face with clients, you know, we're negotiating with other agents, you know, even in our daily lives, it's so easy to listen to conversations, listen to somebody else talking, and the whole time in your head, you're trying to prepare for how you're going to respond or a rebuttal to what they're saying, instead of really listening to understand what they're saying. A lot of times our buyers specifically, we've got to really, really listen and try to understand, you know, read between the lines and what they're telling us. And you've got to have this honed in pretty well to be able to do that. Next one I hear is, and it kind of leads into that, is being able to respond to both their expressed and unexpressed needs. They're not going to tell you everything. We've got to be able, again, to listen, understand what they're not telling us, to be able to respond to those needs. So they might tell us that they don't want to live in a specific school district. And instead of just making that note and saying, okay, figure out why, what are the reasons? And that way, as you move forward with them, you can understand what their priorities are. And it's not necessarily, you know, a specific school district. It's another need that's above and beyond that, that you need to be aware of. Lots of examples of that I could use, but don't treat clients like a number. I think that's one of the most frustrating things as practitioners that I see from our clients, is that they feel like a number. I got to take part last year. It was fascinating. We did a focus group for the association. We were doing a focus group to show them our consumer ads. And the beginning of the focus group, it was led by a professional. It was done in a facility that does focus groups. And we were behind the glass, you know, the mirrored windows, listening in. But the beginning of the discussion was really just kind of setting the stage for what these 12 people thought about real estate agents. And it was fascinating, but it was also incredibly disheartening to hear what they were saying. And the public's perception of us as an industry is not good. You know, they think that we're just there to open doors and pick up checks. They think that all we want to do is close a deal and make money, and we don't care what they necessarily need or want. We've got to be able to really hone in on people's individual needs, not treat them like numbers, make sure they feel as though they've got 100% of your attention all the time. And they might not, but they've got to feel like they do. And I think one of the things that we do oftentimes today, one of the biggest frustrations that I hear from buyers in particular, you know, when they're working with agents, is they feel like, it's kind of a double-edged sword when I say this, but they feel like they're doing all the work. And, you know, they have the ability to go online and look at houses, and they want that ability, and we've given them that ability, but we have to be able to really show our value in other ways right now, and make sure that they understand that they're not doing all the work, that we're really working for them behind the scenes. Express gratitude. It's not always easy when you've got clients that are high maintenance that, are texting and calling constantly. But say thank you. Express the gratitude of them choosing you as an agent. It goes back to not treating them like numbers. Make the time for them. Make them feel special. There are little things that you can do to do that in every communication, every contact that you have with them. Create unique experiences for them. We're going to talk a little bit about this as we go through this presentation, and just some little things that you can do that make them feel like it's a unique experience, that they're not just a number, you're not just running them through your system. Make them feel as though what you're doing for them is unique, and you're trying to create a good experience for them as always. Empower your clients. I always tell buyers and sellers too, when I sit down with them, that I'm going to educate them, that I'm going to give them all the knowledge that I have to empower them to make the decisions. I'm not the one making the decisions in the transaction, they are, but I'm going to empower them with all the knowledge that they need to make really good financial decisions, in the home purchasing process. And I think it's important to empower them with the knowledge and to not assume that they know everything. I know that a lot of times buyers now come to us and they feel like they know everything. They know the process. They know, they've been on Zillow, right? They've watched HGTV. They know how to buy a house in a half an hour. And it's really our job to reel them back and to educate them on the process, to hold their hands, to be eloquent and graceful in how we tell them that they don't know everything, but empower them with the knowledge that we have. And then last but not least, I think that's the last one, you've got to own up and immediately respond to any problems or mistakes. We can't run and hide. I know it's hard. There's challenges that come up in the midst of transactions. We make mistakes. I've made mistakes before. Don't try to cover those up or blame them on other people. You'll get a lot more appreciation if you just own up to them and say, you know what, I gave you the wrong information, or I was incorrect about that, and I need to correct my mistake. That'll go a long way with them, with any of your clients, anybody in your life. If you just own up to them and admit the mistake and then solve it for them. And then immediately responding to any problems. I know I've been in the situation, you don't want to call and you've got bad news for them, you don't want to call them. The best thing you can do is pick up the phone, respond to the issues, help offer a solution or get their input for a solution, but trying to run from it or try to minimize the problems, that's where you start creating just a landslide of issues. Before I move on, anybody have anything else or comments on those? Feel free to type them in the chat or unmute yourself. All right, let's move into some, we're gonna go in here to the meat of what I wanna share with you today and some best practices in working with buyers. How many of you, I want you to type in the chat for me, and there's no wrong answer to this, but how many of you actually sit down with your buyers and do an in-person meeting with them before you ever go out and show them a house? You can also use the reactions and raise your hand as well, or give me a thumbs up. Good, Rebecca says now she does because of Ninja. Kim says yes. Sometimes, I know, sometimes it's really hard to get them to come in and sit down with us. It's really hard to try to go through and set expectations with them when you are showing houses. And I know that there's, a lot of times we get a referral for a buyer, they call us and they're like, okay, they're like, we're ready to buy a house and here's a house that we want to go see. And it's really hard for us to reel them back in and say, hold on, before we go out and see that house, we really need to sit down and set some expectations. And, I want you to understand the process. I want you to understand how I work. It's especially hard in today's market when we have houses that are moving so quickly. And we know that if we don't get them into this house, that they very well could lose it. And so that's a huge challenge, I know, but I recommend even, even if you've got to go, your first meeting with them has to be at the first house, see if they've got some extra time then to go sit down, whether it's at, Panera or Starbucks down the road when they open back up, or bring them into the office. I think it's critical to have a sit down meeting with buyers to really go in depth about the process and set expectations. And you really, it's hard to do that when you're walking through a property. I want to talk a little bit about some of the things that I do in these in-person meetings, and would love to get some information and some feedback and input from you all on what you do in these meetings. And yeah, right now doing an in-person meeting is impossible, but we can use the platforms that we have available. The FaceTime, Google Meets is a great option as well. You can use Zoom, which is what we're on right now. We've got to do these sit downs and really get into the process with them and set the right expectations. They've got to understand, what they're getting into. One of the tips that I have for you is having a process for your buyer interview. If you've gone through Ninja, you've got the Ninja buying process, and you've got the questions that they ask. I do have some resources for you. As we go along here, I'm going to show you some of the templates of resources that I have for you that are in your shared drive. And I'll show you where you access those here as we go along, and I'll pull some of those up. But I made the mistake for a long time of not really having a process. Always tried to do these in-person meetings, but didn't have a process for them. And then oftentimes they seemed a little discombobulated for my clients because we ended up talking about, going down rabbit holes. And I would walk away from these meetings going, okay, I completely forgot to ask this question, or I don't have enough information from them to be able to move forward and to set them up with their online searches. So I think having a process, having something in writing, a checklist for these meetings, the questions that you're going to ask, regardless of whether they're in the order that is on your intake form or on your buyer interview form or not. At some point during these meetings, I'm asking all the questions that are on my intake form and filling out that information the best that I can. I'm going to show you a buyer intake form and Ninja process in just a second here. After I get through this slide, I'll click over and show you what I've got for you on that. The other thing that I do in these in-person meetings is I'm explaining in detail the home buying process. I don't care if they have bought, 5 homes or if it's their first home. A lot of our buyers, it's not like they're doing this on a yearly basis, and a lot may have changed since the last time that they bought a house. And I think explaining to them, your process and what you do, all the things that happen behind the scenes in the home buying process is really critical to set their expectation. You've got to talk about current market conditions. It's really hard to impress upon them, and oftentimes they won't get it until they get out and start looking at houses. That's when they understand how fast houses go under contract, how most of, depending on their price range, we're gonna get up against a lot of multiple offers. And having that discussion with them and setting that expectation ahead of time, while they may not grasp it and they might not understand it then, or they might not even believe you, they will. But you've got to prep them for that. You've got to tell them, the things that you can be doing and that they can be doing if you get into multiple offer situations, and how that works and what the normal process is. That way it's not when you're in the midst of it trying to explain it to them, because then they're incredibly emotional. I always talk to them about the importance of having a pre-approval and what not having one might do. I always tell them, we've got to find out not just what you're pre-approved for, but where you're comfortable with financially. And it could be two different numbers. A lender could tell you you're pre-approved up to 500, but figure out what have the lender pull your cost estimates, figure out what your payment's going to be. Is 500 really where you're comfortable financially? Or do we need to reel it back? Are you more comfortable at a 450 max? The last thing that I want to do is go out and show a buyer houses and then find out that they're not comfortable there and we've got to reel it back down. That is really hard. Once they've been in houses that are 300, 350, and now all of a sudden we've got to reel it back to a 250 house, it's going to be really hard for them to fall in love with anything in their price range. So having that pre-approval, knowing their numbers from a lender before we even start, going out and opening doors and looking at houses, we've got to know what those numbers are, and I want them comfortable with those numbers. It's much easier to go up in price than it is to go back down in price. I talked to them about the importance of having a pre-approval when they write an offer, that sellers aren't going to take their offer seriously unless they have a pre-approval. And with the way the market is right now, you don't want to lose out on a house because you haven't gone through the pre-approval process. I talked to them about that for the most part, it's a pretty quick and easy process to go through a pre-approval. I give them my lender contacts. I tell them the importance of having a lender that's local, someone that's going to pick up their phone on the weekend, that's going to get us an updated pre-approval at midnight because we're trying to write an offer and we're competing. Those are important things for them to realize. And when I give them my list of lenders, I tell them I get nothing financially. I don't get any kickbacks. The benefit that I get is knowing we're going to have a smooth transaction. I want to set us up for success. I don't like surprises. Don't like surprises in the middle of transactions. And I know with these lenders that we're going to get a consistent experience, and we're going to get an experience that's going to be good for them. I don't force them to use one of my lenders, but I certainly give them, my little speech about the importance of having a lender that we've got a good relationship with, that we know is going to give us a smooth process. Next one I have on here is I share with them what happens behind the scenes. So what happens when I walk them through the process of what happens when we find a house that they want to go see. I explain to them what the seller has to do to get their house ready to be shown. If they've never sold a house before, they oftentimes have no idea what goes on behind the scenes at that seller's house to get it ready for them to walk in the door. This really sets the expectation for them that you can't just text me and say, hey, we want to see this house, we're available in a half an hour. It's not always about our schedule. We've got to coordinate that with the listing agent. The seller has to have the house prepared. It really sets the table for them to have a little bit more, for lack of a better word, respect for the process, and to understand what goes on behind the scenes when we're trying to set up showings. So I walk them through that and tell them everything that has to happen for us to walk through the front door of a house. And that really then curbs the last minute, can we go see this house in 10 minutes? Or we're out and about looking at houses and we drive by one that's got a sign in the yard and they can't grasp why we can't just walk in the door. Having that conversation with them on the upfront will really, it'll make your life a lot easier as a buyer's agent, and really set the tone for them in what has to go on before we can actually walk through the door of a house. I talked to them about the 85% perfect home, and I don't know if I got this from Ninja or got it somewhere else, but I talk about it in our initial meeting, and I'm talking about it constantly as we're out looking houses. And I always tell them in our initial meeting, at some point in time during this process, you're going to say to me, why can't I take that house and put it on this lot? And you can't do it. You've got a list of your wants and needs, and you have to realize that there is no 100% perfect house, that it's 85% perfect is what we're looking for, and that you have to determine as we go along, what is that 15% that you're willing to kind of, give up or to be flexible on. And that'll change as they go through the process. And I tell them that'll change. The things that they tell me in our initial meeting that are their absolute must-haves could very well change as we get out and start looking at houses. All of a sudden they could realize, you know what, we don't necessarily have to have those 2 full bathrooms. We could probably get away with having 1.5. But I talk to them a lot about this 85% perfect. And I remind them as we're out looking, we're looking, is this the 85% perfect, or do these check those boxes? I'm going to show you in a second a good graphic to use on that 85% perfect. The other thing that I have them do, and I'll show you what this looks like in just a second when I pull it up here, but I have them go through, this is something that I always do in my initial meetings. I hand them a piece of paper. Let me get this pulled up and I'll show you what this looks like so I can talk you through it. I slide this piece of paper across to them and I have them take a few minutes and fill this out. You have access to this. And I can give it to you too that's unbranded. It doesn't have my big logo at the top of it. If I have a couple that I'm meeting with, I print 2 of these off and I give 1 to each of them. I don't want them filling it out together. And here's why. It's a psychological thing. Oftentimes one of them is going to be the dominant and one of them is going to be a passive. And so I want to know, what I want to know is what the passive person, what their needs and wants are. Because oftentimes that dominant person, they're going to dominate the conversation. It is amazing what happens when you hand this piece of paper to a couple and give them a couple minutes to fill it out. You know, oftentimes you'll have completely different must-haves. You'll have a couple that are the same. You can tell that they've talked about it. But then you'll really get to know what are those unexpressed needs. You know, and once you have them fill this out and start going through that, then you ask the why. Why is this a must-have for you? Why do you have to have a fence? Let's talk about the fence. The fence is something that's cosmetic that can be put in afterwards. Is that really a must-have? Do we really, if I found you the house that checked every single box, but it didn't have a fence, and you knew you could put one in the day after closing, would you still want to see it? It allows you to have those type of conversations after they fill this out. And you figure out, you know, when you've got couples that are filling it out, you figure out where the common ground is and where they might have some different ideas in terms of what they need and what they want and what their deal breakers are. I think it's important. For a long time, I didn't have the deal breakers on there, but I added this to it because I think it's important to know what are their deal breakers. And then again, dig into those whys. Why is that a deal breaker? You really will learn a lot. It's incredible. You'll be amazed at how much you learn about your client by having them go through this exercise of filling this out. Any questions on that or comments on that or the other pieces that that are up here? I'm going to pull those up in just a second to show you what these pieces look like that I use. But do you have any other pieces that you use that that might benefit the group here? Don't everybody talk at once. Maybe get some of these pieces.
Kristen, I'm having a hard
Daly.
time. Hi there. I'm having a hard time doing the chat.
Oh, feel free just to unmute yourself then if you want to ask questions or add something.
Okay, that's a great form. Thanks. I always do that, but I just give them a blank piece of paper. But I like your form.
I'll tell you what's fun about that form is I put it in their file and then I give it back to them at closing. And they'll, you know, 9 times out of 10, they're laughing because what they thought was important and then how that kind of transformed over the course of their home search. You know, they'll look at it and go, gosh, you know, we were completely naive coming into this, or, you know, they'll laugh at what they had said, even if it was, you know, 2 months prior. And it's kind of a fun exercise to take them through.
That's a great idea.
Let me show you where some of these other forms that I've got up here for you, and then I'll show you where you can find all of these after class. So this is a buyer intake form that I use, and I tailor this a little bit, but this is really just kind of the down and dirty details that allows me to have this in their file. That so I've got this information. It's really pretty basic information. You know, I'm asking them things like, you know, do they have a house to sell? Oftentimes this is done even before we get face-to-face. This could almost be done your initial call with them over the phone to help prepare for your initial meeting. What is on here that I wanted to point out? No, it's not on this one. It's on the Ninja one. Let me pull that one up for you.
Would you mind going back to the last, there we go. I want to take a picture of that.
You bet. And I'm happy. These slides will be up for you on the shared drive in Google. I'll show you where you can find those. I'll put this all up there for you. The Ninja buyer process, I lost the one that I had, so I had to download this new one, and it came from a webinar that was done. So this first page, don't worry about. But as you get down here, it walks you through the Ninja process. There are some really good questions in here that are probing questions that are awesome to incorporate in your buyer interviews, in your expectation meetings with them. I like this question. When you purchase your current home, what was the process you used to find the home? How did that process work for you? What would you have changed about that process? What went really well? It really gives you an idea as to the type of experience they've had in the past with home buying. The funnel process, I think, from Ninja is awesome to talk about. I used to have a piece that I use, and now I can't find it anywhere, that I put this into a graphic. But talking to them, when you're setting the expectation about, I always talk to them about, it's a funnel. We're starting up at the top of the funnel. That's how we set your criteria for your online searches. And then what we're doing is a process of elimination. We're getting down into the bottom of that funnel and narrowing down, but we've got to start wide and then start narrowing down from there. And everybody's, top of the funnel is going to look a little bit different. I like the Ninja principle of the rolling top 3 as you're out looking at houses. And I know some of this is difficult to apply when we've got a market where houses are flying off the shelves. But by them having that rolling top 3, it gives them, I lost my words there for a second, but it gives them something to shoot for, and what's their favorite. I know that when I go out and show houses, I have them, if I'm showing them 5 houses, even with 5 houses, I have them do their top, their top 2, their top 3, and that rolls throughout the whole thing. Absolutely, daily with the Ninja process, they tell you not to skip any of these questions. I think all of these are really important. I like this next one, number 6 here. Where do they believe that they're at in the process, and what would have to happen for them to be a 10 in the process? I'll have to find the full buyer process and get that up in the shared drive. But 10 is they're ready to write an offer today. I think asking this question really gives you a sense as to where their mindset is the day that you're meeting them. And you'll know at that point what you need to do to get them to the 10. These forms, Pam asked a quick question if these are all in the Genius docs. I've not put a link there yet, but I will after the class today in Genius. I'll show you, they're all on your shared drive. Let me show you real quick where those are. So if you go to, let me just go to a new tab here. So I've got to pull this down to get a new tab. So if you go to your drive, make sure, I always say this, my caveat, make sure you're logged in at Kansas City Homes, otherwise you won't see this when you get over to drive. But click on drive, and then on the left side under the shared drives, you're going to go to agent training, and then Christian's templates. These are where I'm keeping, and I dump all my templates in here. There's a template for everything I'm showing you in this class under the templates for buyers. These are all the templates we're going to look at today. There's the 10-step buyer process for Ninja that we were just looking at. They have this graphic that that we talked about here on this last slide in the PowerPoint. I think that we could do something to make this a little bit fancier, and I'll try to work on that for you all. But this is a good graphic to show them when we talk about the 85% perfect house, and the things that are the hardest to change versus the things that are the easiest to change and the least significant. Oftentimes they're thinking, when you initially meet with them, is that these items up here, these are their deal breakers. And they don't necessarily realize that these are the easy things to change out. Down here, I always talk to them about focus on the things that we can't change. Location, lot, and general floor plan. Those are my three that I use with them, that those are the things that you can't change. We can't change where it is. We can't change the lot, and we can't change, unless you want to start tearing down walls, we can't change the general floor plan. Everything else can be changed. But I like this form. I want to try to get it into something that looks a little bit nicer. You've got the must-haves here as well that I showed you earlier. What else was on that slide that I skipped here? I think that covers everything on those. As we get further in, I'm going to show you some of these other templates that I use. Before I move on from our initial in-person meeting, setting the expectations, does anybody have questions about any of these? You want to talk about how I'm happy to share with you how I word things to buyers, or how I answer their specific questions, or if you have things that you use in that initial meeting that you think would benefit the group, I'd love to hear from you.
I think you've done a very thorough job. I don't know. I couldn't be any more thorough. It's great.
Thank you, Daly. I appreciate that. PM asked a question in the chat. Do I have them get more than one pre-approval letter for different prices? I don't initially. Initially, what I want them to do is get a pre-approval letter for the amount they're comfortable with, which might not be, and I explained to them, it might not be what you get a pre-approved for, and where you're comfortable with might not be the same number. So let's get a pre-approval letter for the number that you're comfortable. You know, what's that number you're comfortable with? What's the max there? And then I tell them, as we hone in and we get ready to write an offer, this is where our communication with the lender and our access to the lender becomes important, because we'll get updated pre-approval letters as we're writing offers. But initially, the pre-approval letter I want to get from them is what their max comfort is, or what their max approval is. Yeah, PM, oftentimes if they find their house on a weekend and they're using a lender that you don't have, you know, a cell number for direct access to, it's oftentimes really difficult to get those updated letters, which is why it's good to have one initially that's kind of at their max. You know, you're not going above that, and that'll cover you if they're writing an offer for anything under that. I know a lot of buyers agents, you know, when we write offers, we like including a pre-approval that's for the exact amount that our offer is at. I think that in most circumstances, that's a good thing. You just have to be cognizant of, if they start, you know, we get into a multiple offer situation and their offer starts increasing, you better be able to have access to the lender to generate some updated pre-approvals, because it's going to be hard for a seller to agree to the offer if they haven't seen an updated pre-approval from the lender. So either you need to have a stockpile of those, a variety of them from a lender, or make sure that you've got access to the lender at all times. Any other questions or comments before we roll into the next subject? Eric, I'll send those to you. I don't have them in shared drive, but I'm happy to share with you mine. I know that the company has a great relationship, and I've had really good experience with a variety of lenders at First State Bank. I've got a couple others that I use quite often that have different variety of products for them. And make sure when you talk about the lenders and talk about that process, I also talk to them about the different type, just a very high level, because I'm not a lender and I'm not an expert in that field. But I talk to them about, you know, in addition to getting our amount, we also want to know what type of loan they're going to be getting. Is it going to be an FHA? Is it going to be a VA? Is it going to be a conventional? And I tell them and explain to them the difference between those loans at a high level, and then explain to them that oftentimes if they're looking, you know, a lot of times with my first time buyers, you know, they're looking, let's say under 200,000, they might see a house that isn't going to qualify for an FHA loan. And they're not going to know that if they're looking online. And so I explain that to them in this initial meeting, that way I'm not breaking their hearts when they send me a link to a house and say, this, we want to see this house. I can tell them, okay, that one's not going to qualify for an FHA. They understand based on our initial, that expectation I've set with them in our initial meeting, why it's not going to qualify for an FHA. So important to explain those differences to them as well when you're talking to them about the pre-approval process and why it's good to know on the upfront what type of loan program they're going to be using. So Rebecca asked, when I'm in this meeting with them, how much time in explaining the process, how much time in detail do I go into on reviewing all the forms and contracts? I don't go into grave detail on that. When I sit down for this initial meeting, I'm a paper person, and I'll give you a funny story. I give my buyers a small binder, and I put in it my, all of my stuff that I use, and most of it is the stuff that the company generates for us, the buyer process, those buyer, oh my gosh, what is it called? Our buyer pages, our buyer book. I put that all in a binder for them. I add some things to it. I also put a copy of the buyer agency agreement and the all of our a typical offer, what a typical offer packet would include. I am talking to them about the buyer agency agreement at that point. Typically what I tell them in the way that I work on buyer agency is that I'm not asking for you to sign it today when we're sitting down here. I want you to get a sense for how I work. I want to get a sense for you as well. Let's go out and look at a couple houses, make sure that you're comfortable with me and vice versa, and then we'll sit down and we'll sign this buyer agency contract. That's the only form that I really go into any sort of detail with in this initial meeting. I am giving them copies though of all of the contracts, and I tell them they're in there and that I would love for them to look them over and just kind of get comfortable with it. But I am always, and we're going to talk about this when we get to that point, I, if at all possible, am sitting down with them when we write an offer and explaining what they are signing. We have to do that. We have to explain to them what we're signing. They might not want to sit down with you in person, but you better be offering it. If you're not, you're actually violating the code of ethics by not offering it. If they want to do it over .loop, you better be sending it to them in a PDF before you send it to them for their signatures. More often than not right now, instead of sitting down with them in person, when we get to that, I am getting on the phone with them. I'm sending them the contract in a PDF. I'm not even giving them the ability to sign it yet. And I am going over it on the phone with them in detail, explaining what they're signing before I even send them an email, a link for them to put their initials and signatures on a document. That's when I'm going into grave detail about the contract. If I go into grave detail about it during this meeting, first of all, the meeting would be 2 hours and I would lose them. It's not going to really make a whole lot of sense to them right now with this process. And I tell them that. I tell them, we're not going into grave detail about the inspection process right now. I give them high level details on some of that stuff, but what I'm trying to do is, this meeting is really about setting expectations and preparing them for those things, not necessarily going into those details, because it's going to go right over their head, in one ear, out the other, and you're going to overwhelm them. Daly says she goes over the contract in the initial meeting or at some time before we do a contract, highlighting the parts that she wants them to really pay close attention to. And I think that's a good practice as well. I like that as well. Oftentimes when you, especially in the market, that we've had recently, where you've got to write offers and get them submitted fast, sitting down with them ahead of time when you're not under the gun to get an offer submitted is a good time for you to sit down, go over the contract with them, have them ask questions, make sure they really understand what they're signing. That's key. That is key. So let's talk about, we're not going to spend a whole lot of time here, but let's talk about some best practices. After your initial meeting, when you are getting ready to go out and look at houses, organization and preparation for us is absolutely key. I know that's hard to do right now when a house comes on the market. It's the fire drill. It's getting the appointment set up as quick as you can, getting that part arranged, getting the clients there. But the more organized and prepared you can be for showings, the smoother that those are going to go. You know, I try to research if I have time. I'm not just looking at the house we're going to go look at, but I'm looking at the history on it. I'm looking at the tax record on it. I'm trying to pull some general comps for the neighborhood. Typically, I'm pulling a year back, active, pending, backup, sold. I print off the single line. Again, I like having paper. Um, you know, as I'm preparing, I'm printing off the full agent detail with the tax and history. I am printing off the comps for the neighborhood just so at a glance, I know how that house sits in relation to the neighborhood. Is it at the top end? Is it at the bottom end? Does it sit in the middle? That way I can kind of educate them on that as we're walking through it. Depending on how many houses I'm showing, depends on if I actually print the full seller's disclosure, but I am pulling that up and looking at it. If we're looking at quite a few houses, I make notes on my agent detail page after I print it off as to how old the HVAC is, the roof is, how long they've owned it. If there's anything that kind of raises my eyebrows as I'm looking over the disclosure, I make notes of that so we can talk about it when we're at the house. I look at the inclusions, exclusions, so I know, they're going to ask you when you're in the house. Does the refrigerator stay? Does the washer and dryer stay? What all's included? You need to be prepared to answer those questions before you walk in the door versus trying to scramble as you're walking through the house, trying to shuffle paperwork or jump online and figure out what the seller's disclosure says. I also, talking about organization and preparation, I also print off for them the client full detail, or client full, I think is what it's called. And when we go out and look at houses, I'm giving them a copy of that so they can keep track. And again, at that initial meeting, I'm giving them that binder. I told you I was going to tell you a funny story and I never did. So 2 nights ago, I have a client that's getting they're getting transferred out of state and they're trying to get their house ready to get on the market. And they were cleaning out the basement and they sent me a picture of the first binder I ever gave them back when we were Prudential. We weren't even Better Homes and Gardens. It tells you how old it is. That they have the original binder, all of the houses they looked at, all the notes from our initial meeting. And they were laughing at that they still had it, but they actually saved that stuff. But when we're out looking at houses, I'm 3-hole punching those so they can stick them right in their binder. So they can keep track of the houses that we've seen. They can go back to notes, whatever. But, and some of them, they're going to throw them away and that's fine. But at least I've given them the opportunity to stay organized through the home search process. Daly says, is it a long meeting? Hold on, let me read her whole thing here. In the chat. Daly, is there a question in there or just more comments?
No, just a comment about what I do. Depending upon, sometimes what I do is I always do a write-up on each house before I go. And I hand that to them and the cover sheet has all the details on the house. And then they compare as they're going along, taxes and HOA dues and whatever it is that's important to them. And then stapled to that, I have the listing sheets and then and the history and stuff like that. And some people devour every single bit of information and keep it and put it in their buyer book. And some people leave it in the back seat of my car.
Oh, yes. Totally depends on the buyer.
But I do, even if they leave it in the back seat of my car, I do it the next time we go out. They get
Absolutely.
the same treatment every time. And it gives you a clue as to how they work.
Yes. The key for us is being consistent with them. They might trash those sheets, but you're giving them to them and you're being consistent with your process. Libby asked, did I mention that I'm giving my buyers the MLS listing and seller's disclosure in print form? I print off for them. I never give them when I'm printing the full agent detail, don't ever give them that sheet because oftentimes in those agent only remarks, I've seen where agents put in combination codes or garage codes. There's information that we have access to in MLS that is not meant for clients. So I'm printing off the client full detail, and that's what I give to them. I don't give them a printed off seller's disclosure unless they have interest in the house. If they have interest in the house, then I might hand them the printed seller's disclosure that I brought along, or I email it to them right afterwards. But I like for them to have that for sure before we sit down and write an offer. I don't want the first time they see the seller's disclosure when we're writing the offer. I want them to see that any information I can give them ahead of time, you know, that they can look over and then ask questions on. I like making sure they're prepared. Again, I'm empowering them with information.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Some of these sellers' disclosures are filled out better than others.
Oh, yeah.
Some of them you read and they bring up more questions than you had before you started reading it. I customarily will address those questions in the contract, and I don't know how everybody feels about that, and I'll just say seller to complete 8B, 7D, and just whatever it is that's missing.
Yeah, that's a great idea to address it in the contract. I think that's a good place for it. If I have time, I'm asking for the seller to address those before we even write an offer. That way, my clients are comfortable with the responses before we even put pen to paper on an offer. Because oftentimes some of those questions that they answer can end up really affecting the value of the house. You know, if all of a sudden the seller is telling you, oh yeah, we did have a huge, you know, water issue, or oh well, yeah, we forgot to put that on there. Well, that's going to affect my buyer's offer. So I want as many of those questions answered ahead of time.
I agree, that's best if you have the time.
Yes, yes. Second bullet on here, just of note, is when we're able to go out and show a lot of houses to buyers, my best practice is not to show them more than 5 or 6 unless it's a reload person, somebody that's on a very short time frame and we've got to cram in a lot of houses. And I tell them this in our expectation meeting that after about 5 or 6 they all start blending together. So that's why I don't try to schedule more than 5 or 6, and typically they understand that. It just doesn't make sense to go out and show them 12 houses at one time. We've already talked about what I bring along with me. I also just, you know, from a customer service standpoint, whether they're riding with me or not, more oftentimes if they're in-town buyers, they're not riding with me. I have them meet me at the first house and then follow me. But I typically try to bring, you know, some bottled water and some snacks along with me. If I know that they've got kids that are going to be joining, I'll bring, you know, some things that can keep the kids entertained, keep their hands off the houses, and but try to prepare the best I can for that buyer. Oops, I didn't mean to do that. Hold on. I don't know what I just did here. Oh, let's go back real quick. Sorry, I hit the wrong button here on my slide. The other thing that I do is after we look at houses, especially if we've seen 5 or 6, I'll send an email to them with a recap of the houses that we saw. And that way, and I tell them I'm going to do this, and that way they can kind of go back and do a recap and write down some more notes and really go into detail as they're looking online. They can, you know, kind of remind themselves of which house had which feature. And let me show you real quick. Let's see if I can get out of this. I send it, this is an example of one that I did during a class, so it's not an actual real one. But I send it out of HomeSuite. I try to keep all my communication to them when I'm sending them listings out of one platform. And the reason that I do this is because I've realized that it's our fault that they have ADD and that they're going to Zillow and they're going to Realtor.com, they're going to other company websites. It's because we're sending them MLS links and we're sending them stuff from KansasCityHomes.com, and we might be texting them stuff, you know, links from other websites. I try to do as much as I can out of the Kansas City Homes platform. And there's a really awesome tool when you go in there and email the client where you can add MLS numbers. This is what it looks like when it comes across from that, comes across to them. This is one that I sent to prepare them. Again, this was kind of a fake one, but you get the idea here that you could do this after you go show them and say, here's the houses in order of what we saw today, or even say, based on what you told me, here's your top 3 that we saw today. Just wanted to share with you a link so you can go back and look at these as you're discussing tonight. But I try to do these right out of Kansas City Homes. That way, when they click on them, they're clicking right into the Kansas City Homes website. They're familiar with the platform. There's a communication tool in there for us. It keeps everything consistent with the client. Trying to figure out how I got this. There we go. Okay, let's talk about, I'm going to go back real quick because I don't have this really in the slides. I know that I talked about this some as, oh my gosh, it won't let me go backwards. I know I talked about this some a few minutes ago about when the buyers are ready to write an offer, and that it's so easy in today's world and the market to, go back to our office, get it, go home, get it written in .loop, send it over to them, get their signatures on it, and you send it to them in .loop and you have their signatures back in 7 seconds. Did they read it? No, they did not. You have got to explain to them what they are signing. You have to. A, it's a violation of the code of ethics if you don't, but B, that is a huge liability. We've had some lawsuits. Luckily, we were not the ones being sued, but we've had several lawsuits that have come up recently that we were party to on the other side, where the sellers are trying to sue, or buyers are trying to sue the listing agent, listing company, because they didn't understand what they were signing. Is there some onus on the buyers and sellers to read what they're signing? Absolutely, but you have to give them it has to be reasonable effort, and that's how the code of ethics is worded, reasonable effort to explain all contracts and explain all written agreements. So I recommend, as I was saying before earlier, I like sitting down in person with them. If we don't have that opportunity, what I do is send them out of .loop after I have everything prepared. I send them, I don't put them on as a signer. I send an email out of .loop that says, I hit that attach PDF to the email button. And in my message to them, I make sure to explain to them that I want to get on the phone with them and walk them through this contract. Those messages that are sent out of .loop can be accessed later. So if they ever come back and say, well, Daly didn't explain this to me and I ended up buying this and, she didn't tell me what all my risks were, she can go back and pull that up and say, yes, I did. It's right here in writing. You refused you didn't want to get on the phone and go through it. You wanted to go ahead and sign it and move on. You've got to give reasonable effort. I send it to them in .loop in a PDF first. I get on the phone with them. I get on the phone with I put all parties on the phone. If I've got 2 buyers, I'm getting them both on the phone with me, and I'm walking through the contract. Not just the big things, I'm walking through every paragraph. And I'm explaining to them what they are signing. Oftentimes they might be asleep on the other end of the phone, but I know that I've done my job and covered myself in making reasonable effort to explain to them what they're signing. And Daly brings up a good point. That's, it's a good idea to go through the contract with them before you even get to the point of writing the offer. The problem that I've had with that is that before they get to the point where they're writing an offer, if you go through the contract with them, they're not going to remember most of it, because at that point, where they're at mentally at that point is not, they're not laser focused on getting this offer written. And it's hard for them to understand what all these terms might look like until there's an actual house attached to it. Any questions on that, or any other best practices that you have on either the home search, the writing of contracts, how you present it to them? Anything that you want to chime in on here? I know we only have about 15 minutes and I still have I'm talking a lot and I've got a lot of content still to go through, but I'll open it up in case anybody has questions or comments. Okay, we'll go ahead and move into the next step here. Contract to close. This is where we oftentimes fall into that whole, the buyers feel like a number. We've spent a ton of time with them. You get them under contract, and then this is where most agents disappear. And we're not preparing them well for what's going to happen after we write the contract. This is where communication really becomes key on what's next in the process. As we're out looking at houses, that's the point that I'm explaining to them. You know, here's what's going to happen after we get a house under contract. Here's the inspection process. I've got something that I send to them that really explains in detail. I like it in writing. It explains in detail for them the inspection process and kind of the what ifs. I'm going to share that with you and show that's in your templates on the shared drive. I'll show it to you. You can take it and finesse it and put it in your own words. But I like them having that inspection explanation in writing so they can go back and review that at any time. I put that in my initial buyer book. You know, and I tell them we'll really talk in more detail about this as we get closer to that part of the process. I've got an email that I send to them as soon as we're under contract. They're excited. You make that phone call and say, you know, the sellers have accepted. You know, congratulations, we're under contract. Everything you say from that point forward, they've not heard. They're too excited and freaked out because they just bought a house. So I tell them I'm going to follow up with them with an email to explain to them the next steps in the process. And I'll show you in a second what that email looks like. And you have access to that email and you can take it again, make it your own. But I explain to them, here's, you know, we're under contract. Here's what needs to happen next with earnest deposit. You know, here's what happens. Here's what we need to get scheduled as far as inspections. And here's the process for scheduling inspections. The last thing I want them to do is jump on the phone and start getting inspections scheduled. You know, I like spearheading that. I don't like the buyers setting all those up. I like being the point of contact. They can use the inspectors they want, but I tell them that I coordinate all the logistics on that because there's logistics that have to be coordinated, not just with them, but also with the seller. I give them, I've got another document that I give them at that point that I usually attach to this congratulations next steps email. And it is a form that basically outlines for them all of our important dates and important contacts. So they've got it all on one piece of paper. And then as we get closer to close, I've got another email that I send that I'll show you. Let me show you what these look like. The inspection explanation. This is a document that really walks them through. I've got one of these created for sellers as well. But it really explains to them in writing what I would be explaining to them in person with how the inspections work. What are the common inspections? I'll be present for the inspections. How long does the inspection take is in here. You know, that I recommend you're present for at least a half hour of the inspection. Right now, I don't want you there. We'll do it virtually. What happens after inspections? If you choose the offer to renegotiate, what does that look like? We can renegotiate for repairs. We could renegotiate for a price reduction or for seller paid closing costs or credit. So that's that document. This is what my congratulations next step. It looks a little bit different for every buyer, but I save this as a template in my Gmail and I'm able to pull it up. This is all about inspections, and this one I don't mention earnest deposit. This was just one of the most recent ones that I sent, but I kind of explained to them what needs to happen next. I give them contact information for my preferred inspectors. Oftentimes what happens is after I send this email, they jump online and they research a little bit, and then typically by the next morning, they're like, okay, you know, I want to use Mike. Based on what, you know, I've gone out and looked at all of these, and maybe they've gone out and done their own research and they want to use someone different. But I give them the opportunity and the time to research and decide what inspections they want done and what inspectors we're going to use. Okay, next one on here is this is the template that I give them that I'm usually attaching to that the next steps congratulation email. And this is my important dates for buyers that go under contract. The contract effective date, when their inspection time period expires. Once I have inspection scheduled, I fill this in. Who they've chosen for inspectors, I'll put that in. When it's scheduled, what our walkthrough date needs to be. Usually I'm giving them a window here. What our closing date is, what the possession date is. Important contacts, I'm putting their lender, whoever they're using as a lender, I'm putting on this sheet. Who the title company is and the closer. So anything that it's basically a quick sheet for them of their important dates and contacts for contract to close. I do share these. Libby asked if I share these as a PDF with my clients or just an email format. This goes as a PDF to them. The congratulations next step, this is put into an email. And then I attach a PDF of this. And then I'm updating this somewhat throughout the process once I've got some updated dates and whatnot. The finish line email that I send to them is, I send this out about 2 weeks prior to close. And this is basically just we're 2 weeks out. I've set up your closing date and time. Typically, obviously I've been communicating with them about our closing date and time. But as soon as I have that set, that's usually when I send this finish line email, which is on my checklist, it's 2 weeks prior to closing. But this isn't sent as a PDF, this is sent as an email. I've got it in the templates for you as a document, so you can copy and paste this if you want it. But this walks them through what are our next steps? What do we need to be preparing for before our close date? We need to schedule our final walkthrough. I prepare them that the house is not going to be in show condition. It's going to be in boxes. Closing, when our closing is scheduled for, what they need to bring, how they're going to get information on the funds that are due at closing. They need to bring a cashier's check. When they get possession and how I'm going to coordinate that is in here. Again, I have this saved as a template. Not every buyer gets the same email. I go in and I change out all the dates and some of the, some of the query details that are pertinent to their transaction. Under utilities that you either want to call or go online to set these up in your name. Have service starting April 16th. Here's the contacts. Most you can do online. Electrical, I've got the company, link to the website and a phone number for them for electric, gas, water, and then trash pickup if they're going to have to handle that. If there is an HOA that's pretty active, I'll also put in the HOA contact with the website so they can start connecting with their new neighbors. I'll put in, if I know that they want or that they need contacts for internet or phones or, television, I'll put some of that in. This is kind of the bare minimum for the utility contacts that I put in. But that's the email that goes to them about 2 weeks prior to closing. I'm going to move past this discussion about, inspections and how to keep things moving forward, just in the essence of time. We've got about 8 minutes left, but we can certainly come back to that if we've got time at the end, or if anybody has anything any questions or discussion that they want to have on what you do during inspections and how you keep things moving forward. I want to talk for just a second. We're going to flip gears for just a minute here on this next slide, and we're going to talk about what you do as an agent to keep it together when you're working with co-op agents, and some things that you need to be keeping in mind to keep things moving forward and to keep everybody moving forward, not just with buyers, but also when you're representing sellers, and some best practices to really go above and beyond for your co-op agents, which is not always easy. I will tell you, as a buyer's agent, especially in today's market when we've got multiple offers, that your first impression, your first contact with that listing agent could be a make or break for whether they're going to take your buyer's offer. As a listing agent, I found when I have good communication from the start with a buyer's agent and we get into multiple offers, I am much more apt to tell my seller about what my communication has been like with the buyer's agents thus far, because I know if they're communicating with me now, if they're picking up their phone, if they're calling me, that they're probably going to do that throughout the transaction, versus the agents that just send over an offer and never even call to tell you that it's coming. They just expect you to check your email and know that an offer has been submitted. Get in contact with the listing agent as early as you can. Call them before the showing and say, hey, you know, this is Christian. I'm showing your property on Main Street at 4 o'clock today. Anything I need to know, you know, going into the showing. If my buyers have interest, what is your preference on submitting a contract? Do you want it in PDF? Do you want me to share it in .loop? Come up with some reason to reach out and start communication with them and show them that you are going to, it's going to be a good transaction. It's going to be a smooth transaction, and you're going to be communicating. I provide, and I'll show that what this looks like, but when I'm submitting my buyer's offer, I provide a cover sheet that gives them a quick glance at our offer summary. I can't tell you how many times I've done this, and a listing agent has said, oh my God, that was incredible that you did that. It saved me a ton of time, especially if you've got, you know, a situation where you've got multiple offers. Make it as easy as you can for the listing agent. That'll go a long way. Don't assume, ask questions. This is true whether you're listing agent or buyer's agent. You know, when we're working with co-op agents, don't assume that it's going to be a contentious situation. When you pick up the phone, we're all trying to work towards the same thing, right? And our transactions don't need to be a confrontation on every single phone call. Don't assume that the news that you're calling to tell them is going to be bad, that it's going to tick them off, or you think, oh my gosh, they're going to freak out when they get this resolution. They might be okay with it. Don't assume that. Go into it with a very positive attitude and a very solution-driven attitude, not a create problems attitude. Rebecca asked real quick, going back on that cover, I send it to them in .loop, and then I also attach it to an email if I'm sending it to them in email format. But I upload it into .loop as a separate document. It's usually the first thing they see then when they open up the loop. I always check the box when I'm sharing things in .loop. I check the attach as a PDF. Our email, I know on Gmail in particular, we'll treat it a little bit differently if there's nothing attached to it. If something is attached to it, a lot of email systems will treat it as a priority email. So I always attach that box to attach it as a PDF. It also makes it a lot easier on the listing agent if they've got it as a PDF in their email versus having to go into .loop and try to sort through all the documents. Okay, going back to working here with the co-op agents. Keep your emotions to yourself. This is not about you. It's not about whether or not the listing agent is being nice to you. It's about what is in the best interest of your buyer. And yes, you might take a beating. Every conversation you have with the listing agent might be a confrontation, and they might be the biggest jerk that you've ever dealt with. Don't pull your buyer into that drama, because what's going to happen? The buyer is going to then be negative. The buyer is going to think that the seller is the biggest jerk they've ever met. And maybe they're not. Maybe it's just the agent that's the jerk. But try to keep that separated. We shoulder a lot in the transaction, and you need to shoulder the emotions too. Take the emotions out. You're the mediator here. You've got to get everybody to the closing table, and it doesn't do you any good to have your clients brought into the drama if they don't need to be brought into the drama. Don't tell them, and I know it's hard, and I've made this mistake in the past, where I'll call a buyer back and say, oh my God, this listing agent's an absolute jerk. Here's what they said. And then what does that do? It immediately puts my buyer on the defensive. They're less likely to negotiate. They're less likely to be, work out some type of a win-win situation. Keep those emotions to yourself. A good agent will keep up a really good front for their clients to keep things moving forward. It doesn't mean that you don't disclose things to them or don't hide things from them. I'm talking about the emotions, and I'm talking about the personalities in the transaction. If you've got a listing agent that's difficult to deal with, you know, as much as you can, you need to shelter that from your clients. Oftentimes, you know, we get in a situation where a listing agent won't even pick up the phone. We can't get them to communicate. And you know, you don't want to look like the bad non-communicator. So, you know, you've got to tell your buyers, listen, I can't get, listing agents not getting in touch with me right now. I'm trying to get in touch with them, but try to keep the drama away from the clients. Remember that we're all working towards the same goal. This is not a battle. We're not going into battle. You know, we're all working towards the same thing. You might not get, the agent on the other side might not reciprocate that attitude, but the more you can, the better the whole transaction is going to be. This kind of goes back to the don't assume and ask questions. When you call the listing agent or you call the agent on the other end, the tone of your voice and what you say to them is going to set the entire, the stage for that conversation and that negotiation. Try to be positive. Even if you're getting ready to, your buyer's written a completely asinine low ball offer, it's your job to present it. You know, don't assume that the seller is going to turn it down. Don't tell the listing agent, I know that your sellers are going to freak out. Here's our resolution. No, don't start it that way. Anybody have any other ideas on this or tips that they have for, or questions about working with your co-op agents? I know there's frustration. Not everybody does it the same. Not everybody offers the same level of service, and it can be real frustrating, but try to shoulder it.
I think the best guide for me is treat them like we want to be treated, no matter what we're presented with.
100%. 100%.
And sometimes that is very hard to do, but that's part of our job in representing our client.
Most definitely. Most definitely. The transaction is not about you, it's about the client. It's about the client. Let me show you, before I forget, let me show you what this cover sheet looks like that I send. This is an offer. I should probably take all this out of there before I share it with you. I put this exactly what it looks like for the listing agent. I put the property address, who my buyers are, their legal names are right there at the top. That way they don't have to, as they're getting ready to write a counter or whatnot, they don't have to go search in documents for it. What the purchase price is, are they asking for seller paid closing costs, warranty, what the net offer is to the seller. Closing date, possession, earnest deposit, what kind of financing are they obtaining, down payment, who the lender is, inspection time period, any additional terms and conditions, and what the expiration is. All of the gory details that you're searching on an offer for as a listing agent are right here on one page for them at a glance. It is in docs, yes, Pam. It's in the shared drive. It's all in this folder, and I need to go in and delete some of this personal information that was on that. I didn't realize it was in there. I'll do it right now while we're looking at it. Everything is right here under templates for buyer, and the one I just showed you is right here in a doc. If you click on it, up here at the top, hit open with Microsoft Word, and then you can go in and edit this. So
Christian, can you put the sheet up you had just before?
The slide? Or
yes. No, the keeping things together. Yeah, yes. Thank you.
You're welcome. But yeah, most of these Pam are saved in that. I've tried to convert them all into docs, so you can go in and edit those. You can put your own contact information on them. You don't have to recreate them. If something is missing in that folder, let me know. I've tried to make sure everything is in there, but let me know.
Christian, this is Pam Coppin. Should we be all I see in my shared drive is agent marketing folder. I don't see anything else. Is there a special? Yeah, I just have the one.
You know what? Let me make a note of that and make sure that IT has You should have access to that. And you're logged in with your Kansas City Homes, correct?
Yes, yeah, and I just see agent marketing.
Okay, that's an IT glitch. So I'm making a note of it now. I'll let them know.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Real quick, and I know we're over time, and if you have to bug off, you're not going to offend me. I just want to talk about the closing table. When you get to closing, show up. You should always, I don't care if it's a buyer or seller, you need to be there. Right now, you have to sit in the parking lot and sit in your car. But be present, show up for them and be there. Again, I'm a paper person. I print off a document package for them. I typically stick it in a folder. I print off if I think it's necessary for them. Sometimes with the document package, I'm now sharing it digitally because we can get there's so many documents. But what I am definitely printing off for them is their home warranty confirmation, and I'm giving them the home warranty brochure so they know how to contact the home warranty company. I print off the full inspection report, all 85 pages of it. Nobody ever prints off a full inspection report. Inevitably, they'll move into the house and be like, oh my God, the inspector missed this. If they have a copy of that full inspection report, they go right to it, look at it and say, oh no, here it was right in our inspection. It was like that when we came for the inspection. So give them a copy of that full inspection report, not just the summary. Give them the full thing. They never make copies of that. And then I've got a template that again is in your shared drive that I fill out for them and put at the cover of this. And it's just the gory details on some information on their new home. Oh, that is not the new home template. I've got that linked incorrectly. I'll get that fixed. Let me see if I've got that in here. It should be in here. That's a good one. So I want to pull it up and show it to you. Oh, nope, I've got it saved there incorrectly. So I'll get the correct one set up there. It looks a lot like this, but it has information about like what the garage code is, what the trash day is, the home warranty company, the phone number for the home warranty company. Let me see, hold on just a second. I've got one saved in my own drive. I just have to find it. Here's the raw, oh, you jerk, hold on. I'll show you what the raw one looks like. I've got to open it through pages. Bear with me for just a second. This is what it looks like. And I can add more lines. Can you all see this or you can't see this right now?
Can't see
this?
Nope.
Okay, hold on just a second. Let me share with you. Let me stop sharing and then let me share my entire screen. Okay, now can you see this?
Yes.
Okay, good. So this is what this looks like. I'll get the correct one put up there in on the templates for you. But this is what I print off and put at the beginning of all their document package at closing. It gives them their trash day, trash service company, if they have a garage code, I put that right at the top. If there's an alarm code that I can give them, I put that up here. But I can go in here and I can add more rows to this if I need to. If I know they're having work done based on inspections and we had some estimates done and I know what contractor they're using, like for instance, on this one, they were using Norris Foundation after closing to do some foundation work. So I've got their contact information right on here. Anything that they might need, important stuff they need right after they close. Who is the Homes Association? What's the website? Who's the contact? Their home warranty, the policy number, and how they file a claim. Good information here. You could get real fancy with this and put all your preferred vendors on here for like carpet cleaning, for landscape, whatever. You could do a lot with this, but it's good to position yourself then post-closing as a resource for them. And then I always include a closing gift. Okay, I know we're over time, so I'm going to skip my last slide here. I'll pull these up so you can read over these, but these are some things that I do after the transaction to stay in touch with them. Don't be afraid to check in with them. Call them call them the day after they take possession. I know a lot of agents get scared to call them because they're like, well, what if there's a problem? What do I say? Help them solve it. Be a resource for them. It's okay that there's a problem. They're not going to blame it on you. Help be the resource for them to solve the problem. Things come up, things happen. They're not going to yell and scream at you, but you're not going to know about them unless you call them. I've, as a closing gift, has hosted housewarming parties for them. It's a great opportunity to connect with their friends and family. It's an awesome opportunity to both show your appreciation for them and also, get some new business. Do change of address cards for them that they can send out with your branding on it. Use the postcards that we have in Print Time and DMS, which are now also in Canva for you. Doing pop buys, stopping by, taking them, a little gift. Right now, take them a roll of toilet paper, if you can find it. I thought I'd call yesterday, and I've got another BHG guy on the West Coast. He's trying to find BHG branded toilet paper. I'm like, good luck. I don't think I'd want to use that. I've got another slide in here. Again, I'll put the slide deck and PDF in that folder on agent training, but some ideas for client events. Some of these cost some money, others would cost you nothing except time. But just some good ideas, to stay in touch with not just your buyers, but your clients in general.
Christian, would you put up the closing sheet again, please?
Let me go back to that one. Oh, let me just click on this. It'd be a heck of a lot easier.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, thank you for hanging in there. I know we're a little bit over time here. If you've got any questions or comments or things you want to add, feel free. I'll open it up before I shut down the meeting.
This has been very valuable. I appreciate all your insights.
You bet. I'm happy you were here. Thank you for participating and giving us some other good tips. I appreciate it. Pam asked here, I don't know if Pam is still on here. Pam Bowman asked, was it Pam that asked that? Yep, some closing gift ideas. I'll send you some. I do my go-to is a engraved, personalized cutting board that has the GPS coordinates of their house on it. It's kind of a cool thing. It's something that they'll display, that they'll use when they're entertaining, and it becomes a conversation piece. A lot of people say, oh my gosh, where'd you get that? They'll say, my real estate agent gave it to me for closing. I don't have my branding on it. It's a gift for them. I think I don't put branding on it. A great gift idea right now, and I think Rebecca mentioned it, was doing cleaning service for them, getting the house deep cleaned before they move in. So you can get real creative with closing gifts.
One thing I do is I take them dinner the night they move in, and it's full dinner, soup to nuts, all good throwaway plastic things and a trash bag to throw it all away, and it's done.
That's really nice. I've had pizza delivered to them before, as they're moving in and taking food over to them. But yeah, that's a great touch. Very good idea.
I go to Olive Garden and get their lasagna and their salad, and then I pick up dessert, a pie or whatever, and I take drinks, and I take bread, and actually it'll last them for more than one meal for most families. So
Yeah,
people really appreciate that.
that's a great idea, Daly. Really good idea. Very good idea.
And
All
all of
right.
this is going to be available on the shared drives.
Yes, I'll put the slide deck up there, and then I'll get a link on BHGenius this afternoon. I'll put another link. I'll show you where I'm going to put this, and it'll be a quick link to all of these resources. Under resources, under the class resource links, I'll probably put it right here where I've got a space, a link to all these. It'll probably be called Above and Beyond Customer Service, and it'll link into the templates folder, which is right here.
Perfect.
And I'll put, oh, that's not the templates folder. This is the templates folder, and I'll put a copy, a PDF of the slide deck in there as well for you. All of the templates that you saw today, and I'll get that one fixed for you, are under it's in the folder Templates for Buyers. Everything you saw today is right there for you.
Okay, thank you so much, Christian.
You are welcome. You are welcome. Thank you all for joining. I appreciate it. I'm going to stop recording here and end the meeting. But I appreciate you hanging out and staying a little bit longer than we had allotted.